Canada has just canceled the F-35 deal. Portugal has also withdrawn, and now a move that could change the North American defense landscape.
Comes just 2 days after a similar decision by Portugal. In January 2023, the Trudeau administration had signed a contract with Lockheed Martin to purchase 88 F-35 fighter jets.
Canada has just grabbed the world's attention by deciding to cancel the $19 billion USD deal to purchase 88 F-35s from Lockheed Martin, a deal they signed in 2023. And it's not just Canada. Portugal has also announced its withdrawal from the F-35 program. These two countries are now seeking alternative defense solutions, no longer depending on the US, and aiming for independence in protecting national security. The reason for canceling this deal is directly tied to the trade and political tensions between Canada and the US, especially under the leadership of Donald Trump. With protectionist policies and severe tariffs, reliance on the US for defense is no longer a safe option for Canada. For Portugal, the decision to withdraw from the F-35 program is equally significant. Portugal's Defense Minister Nuno Melo pointed out that the instability in US foreign policy under Donald Trump has made it impossible for them to continue pursuing the plan to acquire these fighter jets. The country is now seeking replacement fighter jets while building a more flexible and independent defense force, reducing dependence on traditional partners. So, if it's not the F-35, then which fighter jets will replace them in Canada's defense strategy? One of the most promising options right now is the Saab J39 Gripen, a product from Sweden. Saab has proposed building the Gripen in Canada.
There's a commitment, a legal commitment to buy those. But another jet is being talked about a lot, which is the Saab Gripen. That was the runner-up in the long procurement process to get these F-35s lined up. And they'd committed to make more,
which would help transfer technology and develop the domestic defense industry of the country. This is a great opportunity for Canada to gain more autonomy in equipping its military and defense systems, while maintaining strong cooperation with NATO countries. While Canada is looking for these alternative solutions, the country's defense industry is also growing strongly. Canada has a defense industry that contributes about 10 billion Canadian dollars annually to the economy and creates more than 64,000 jobs. Companies like General Dynamics Land Systems in Ontario and CAE Inc. in Montreal are supplying essential military products for Canada's armed forces and government agencies. The Canadian government is also accelerating domestic defense technology development programs, aiming to reduce dependence on international partners. On the other hand, the shift in Canada's defense strategy is not just an internal shift, but also reflects a broader trend in global military relations. The European Union, EU, with countries like Germany, France, and Italy, has increased defense spending by more than 30% from 2021 to 2024, reaching approximately 326 billion euros by 2024. Europe is now looking to reduce reliance on US military systems, while promoting autonomy in developing advanced defense technologies. The EU's Rear Europe initiative, which is expected to raise up to 800 billion euros to invest in defense, shows Europe's determination to achieve strategic autonomy in military systems. Canada is also working strongly with European countries in developing alternative defense solutions and sharing technology. The military cooperation between Canada and European countries is becoming an important part of Canada's defense strategy, helping create a more independent and flexible defense force. Along with this, European countries are also intensifying initiatives to ensure defense autonomy, reducing reliance on external partners outside the region. Stay tuned for more exciting developments to come. In February 2025, the US government shocked global markets by imposing a steep 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada, igniting a trade conflict unlike anything seen before. With over 80% of Mexico's exports directed toward the US, the response from Mexico was not only swift, but also strategic. And at the center of the storm, the auto industry, which accounts for 27% of Mexico's export value, now stands at serious risk. It all began when the US administration tightened trade policies with major partners, aiming to protect domestic manufacturing and increase border control. But Mexico is not a minor player. The country is the top supplier of goods to the US, and its production network is deeply intertwined with the North American economy. As soon as the tariffs were announced, Mexico's markets went into shock. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum didn't hold back, declaring, "We will not accept this imposition." To reinforce her stance, Sheinbaum led a massive protest at Zocalo Square in Mexico City. tens of thousands of people waved Mexican flags and chanted, "Mexico deserves respect." But Mexico's response wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. The Mexican government quickly engaged in diplomatic efforts to limit the fallout from the new tariffs. What followed was a high-stakes game of political and economic maneuvering that's still unfolding. Under intense pressure from businesses and the public, Mexico avoided an immediate escalation by turning to negotiation. Within weeks, President Sheinbaum met directly with the White House. The result? A temporary reprieve. The U.S. agreed to delay tariffs on goods covered under the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, until April 2nd. Mexico celebrated this as a win, but not a complete one. The U.S. government refused to lift tariffs on steel and aluminum, two critical materials for the auto industry. That decision has left North American automakers scrambling to adjust. Ford, GM, and Stellantis quickly raised alarms that rising production costs could lead to higher car prices and potential factory closures. The question now, how much damage can the industry absorb before it breaks? If you're planning to buy a new car soon, you might want to think twice. Ford has warned that tariffs could push the price of an F-150 truck up by as much as $12,000. GM and Stellantis have suggested they may need to reduce production or even shut down some plants to manage rising costs. Why the chaos? It comes down to the supply chain. The North American auto industry relies on an incredibly complex production network. Some auto parts cross the US-Mexico border up to 8 times before a car is completed. Every crossing under the new tariff means an extra cost, and that cost will be passed on to consumers. Electric vehicles, EVs, aren't immune either. Batteries, sensors, and electric motors, many sourced from Mexico, are about to get a lot more expensive. That's bad news for an industry that's already struggling to meet demand for affordable EVs. And it doesn't stop there. The tariffs have created a domino effect that's shaking the entire economy. As soon as the tariffs were announced, the financial markets took a hit. The Dow Jones dropped over 700 points in a matter of days. Meanwhile, the Mexican peso weakened by 5% against the US dollar, driving up domestic prices and adding pressure on Mexico's already fragile economy. But Mexico is not standing still. The Mexican government is aggressively pursuing new trade deals with Brazil, China, and other South American countries to reduce dependence on the US market. These moves could permanently alter trade flows across the Americas. Mexico has also hit back with retaliatory tariffs on key U.S. agricultural exports. Corn, soybeans, and avocados, major U.S. exports to Mexico, are now subject to steep Mexican tariffs. This is a major blow to farmers in Texas and California, who are already grappling with rising costs and uncertain market conditions. This conflict is far from over. The temporary tariff suspension under USMCA will expire on April 2nd, and if no resolution is reached, the full 25% tariffs will take effect across all sectors. Will Mexico and the U.S. find common ground, or are we headed toward a full-scale trade war? One thing is certain, the future of North America's auto industry and the broader economy is hanging in the balance. Stay tuned. Canada breaking away from the U.S., Europe becoming the new partner. In 2025, trade between Canada and the EU has surged by over 50% in just 6 years, while trade relations with the U.S. have hit rock bottom for the first time in decades. Canada's Prime Minister has not chosen Washington as his first official visit. Instead, he went straight to Europe. Is this the moment Canada finally steps away from America's influence? Trade war. The U.S. slaps Canada with tariffs. Once one of the strongest trade relationships in the world, Canada and the U.S. are now locked in a trade war, and it all started with Washington's aggressive tariff policies in 2025. February 1st, 2025. The U.S. imposed a 25% tariff on most Canadian imports. March 11th, 2025. The U.S. doubled tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum to a staggering 50%, sending shockwaves through global metal markets. For Canada, it was an economic nightmare. But Ottawa wasn't about to sit idly by. March 12th, 2025, Canada strikes back, announcing a 25% retaliatory tariff on $21 billion worth of American goods. And this time, it wasn't just symbolic. Canada hit back where it hurts, targeting steel and aluminum, crippling U.S. exports, consumer goods, from processed foods to household items. High-tech products, a massive industry between the two nations. For the first time in modern history, Canada is showing that it no longer relies on the U.S. for economic survival. And this is where things get even more interesting. Europe, Canada's new strategic partner. In a shocking move, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney skipped Washington altogether in his first official trip and went straight to France and the UK. Why? The CETA trade deal, Canada-EU trade agreement, has boosted Canada-EU trade by over 50% since 2017. The EU is now Canada's third largest trade partner, only behind the US and China. Canadian exports to the EU have soared 46.4% since 2016, giving Canada more options than ever before. Mark Carney himself made it crystal clear: Canada is the most European nation outside of Europe. And it's not just about trade. Canada's pivot to Europe is also about military power. Canada joins Europe's military alliance, a shift in global power. Canada isn't just looking to Europe for economic strength. It's also making big moves in the military sphere. Some major developments. Canada joins the EU's PESCO military project, allowing faster troop movements across Europe. Canada leads NATO forces in Latvia, solidifying its role in defending Europe from external threats. Canada expands intelligence sharing with the UK, boosting cybersecurity and economic warfare defenses. For the first time ever, a non-EU nation is participating in PESCO, proving that Canada is now an essential player in European security. The message is clear: Canada is no longer looking only to the US for global leadership. The US reacts, but is it losing control? The White House is not happy, and Washington is pulling every trick in